The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 174. Mistakes finally catch up with Team 134 in a brutal overtime loss to Penn State. This week, the high-octane offense of Indiana invades the Big House. That and more on this week's show.
Oh man, Euchre's been broadcasting for 27 years. I have never seen anything like this. They need 2 inches. Dennis Franklin, the quarterback, taking a long con from center. He heads off to Shuttlesworth 5, and it's down to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Dennis Franklin! Oh my God, Dennis Franklin fooled everybody. He fooled me. He fooled the entire Ohio State team. Kneeling is Larry Gustafson. Attempting will be Super Toe. Super Toe will kick the 30-yard field goal. It's good to send over in. It's a tied-up ball game. 10-10. Okay. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Carter's down. Oh my God. Carter scored. Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going to the end zone. Carter's on the pass. In the air, it's done. Buford is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
This is the Michigan Man Podcast. On GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. For Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It's bounce back week for the Wolverines. After suffering through a 4-overtime loss on the road to Penn State, Michigan has to regroup and get ready for another test this Saturday against the improved Indiana Hoosiers. The same Hoosiers that hammered Penn State 2 weeks ago. On our visitor segment today, our guest will be Indiana radio play-by-play voice Don Fischer. Then on Michigan Gameday, we have Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Before we get to that though, my view from Section 17. What did we learn in Saturday's overtime loss to Penn State? Nothing we already didn't know or suspect. The offensive line is just not good enough or experienced enough in the interior to move the line of scrimmage. After 6 weeks of trying to pound it up the middle a good percentage of the time, we're seeing it just isn't working. I'm certain that Coach Hokes and his staff are as disappointed as we are that the power running game is going nowhere. By this time of the year, a team is usually wedded to a philosophy or style, for better or for worse. But as Nick Baumgardner said in our interview this week, it might be time to flip the playbook and go with what's worked for this offense so far this year. Like it or not, that is the option breed. Yes, it opens up Devin Gardner to more hits, which could lead to disaster if he goes down. We all know that. We don't have to abandon the power run game, just de-emphasize it in the coming weeks, and then hope the offensive line play improves. I mean, what options do we have at this point? The defense, I thought, played well again on Saturday, other than the last really horrendous drive they surrendered in regulation. I'm not sure this is the kind of defense that can make up for the sins of the offense, but they at least are showing steady improvement, and they will be severely tested in this week's game. It is what it is. You either beat your head against the wall and continue to pound the ball up the middle, or you diversify and start using what has worked best this year for the offense. Big questions, big decisions, and another big game this Saturday to see if this Wolverine team can recover and gain some direction heading into the bye week. They have to, because the 5 games coming up in November will require this team to be better than they have been, or it's going to be a long month. I'm optimistic we're going to turn it around. Don Fischer is the play-by-play voice for Indiana football and basketball. He joins us next on our visitor segment here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Joining us on our visitors segment this week as we get ready for the big Indiana game this Saturday, the Hoosier play-by-play voice, Don Fischer. Don, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Don, 2 weeks ago, one of the biggest wins in recent memory for the Hoosiers at home against Penn State. And then, of course, that big game Saturday in East Lansing against Michigan State. A lot of momentum heading into the game. How disappointed was the team in that performance on Saturday?
Well, I can't argue that they weren't disappointed, but this is a team that seems to resuscitate itself rather quickly. It's a ball club that doesn't languish in the past very long. I know they were disappointed they didn't win. They knew going in it was going to be a very difficult test, playing their first road game of the season, and on top of that, playing against the number one defense in the country. And yet they were able to put 28 points on the scoreboard. They didn't do it. It wasn't pretty the way they did it, but they were able to get 28 up there, which is as many points as anybody has scored against Michigan State in the last 6 years. So that was a positive. The negative was that Indiana's defense simply didn't force enough turnovers, didn't get stops in crucial situations, allowed Michigan State to control the football for 37 minutes of the ball game. And those were the disappointing aspects of this contest for this football team. And as everyone knows that follows Indiana, defense has been a struggle for a long time now. It's not just been this year, last year, the year before. It's been that way for about 20 years at this point. They've had a lot of really good offensive football teams. Defense has always been the Achilles heel. It continues to be with this ball club. And yet they've had a couple of games this year where they look very good defensively. So there's progress being made, but of course it's not enough at this juncture. And thus far this year, this team has been on a roller coaster ride. It was up, down, up, down, up, down. And now they're hoping to go back up again this week against Michigan, but it will not be any picnic in Ann Arbor.
Well, you're right. The defense has looked good at times. I thought they looked very good against Penn State, especially stopping the Penn State run. And I know Coach Wilson's going to say the D has to play tougher, but does he realistically have the personnel on board right now to expect that this defense can get better this year?
Well, my personal opinion is that they've got some young kids that can play, that are getting experience, that are playing some. They're not starters yet, and they will make a difference at some point down the road, whether that's this year or next year. Anybody's guess at this juncture. I just don't think that they have quite enough talent yet to be in that mix where they can literally make a lot of adjustments that will make them a better defensive football team. I think that they are what they are. The good news is that very often they are in the right positions to make plays. Sometimes their talent level just doesn't allow that to happen. And I'm not saying they're bad defensively, but they're just incrementally better than what they have been. And incrementally doesn't mean that they're going to get stops against really good offenses. And unfortunately, when you're facing teams in the Big Ten, there's no rest. You've got every time you play somebody, you're playing against a really good offensive football team. And unfortunately, right now, Indiana's got their back to the wall in that regard because now they're coming up to Michigan. They're going to play a team that is very capable of putting a lot of points on the scoreboard, and they're going to have to play their best game defensively of the year to have a chance in this one.
Well, Don, back on the offensive side for the Hoosiers, do you see the two quarterback rotation being used the rest of the way?
Well, honestly, there's no real rotation there. Nate Sudfeld is the starter. Mm-hmm. Trey Roberson has come in the last couple of weeks now and played primarily 2 weeks ago against Penn State. He basically came in with packages down near the goal line. So he didn't really play as a rotating quarterback. He simply had plays designed for him that would give Indiana some options inside the 10 or the 15-yard line. Last week he came in, or this past Saturday he came in against Michigan State because Nate Sudfeld was struggling to throw the football accurately, especially downfield. And in those situations, Trey played very well and stayed in the ball game more minutes than he has at any point this season. So even though people are looking at it as a rotation, that kind of thing, if Sudfeld had been performing up to expectations, he would have stayed in the ball game. It's based on what we've seen to this point. It's predicated on if Nate plays really well or not. And if Nate's playing well, you probably won't see Trey Roberson unless it's one of those goal line situations where his package comes into play.
Well, whoever's under center, this offense through 6 games is averaging over 500 total yards per game, which is absolutely amazing. Racked up just about 400 yards against State on Saturday and only had the ball for 22 minutes. How long has it been, Don, since you've seen an Indiana offense that's this good?
Well, the truth of the matter is we've seen a lot of Indiana offenses that have been good over the years. I mean, Antoine Randall L. years were phenomenal offensive years. Even the Kellen Lewis and Ben Chappell years were pretty good here recently. So we've had good offenses. That's never been the issue. The issue has been putting or keeping teams from putting points on the board against Indiana. And we talked about that already. But this offense is good. It's really, really good. And they're high energy, their quick tempo offense it definitely puts teams off. It gives them problems because generally you don't face a team that tries to go as fast as Indiana does from an up-tempo offensive standpoint. And honestly, it is surprising they've been able to score as many points as they have against some of the better teams. 25 against the Missouri team that's still unbeaten and knocked off Georgia this past week out of the SEC. 28 against Michigan State's number 1 ranked defense in the country. And they scored 73 against the lesser team like an Indiana State team. And this is a good offensive football team. There's no question about it. My biggest issue offensively right now is with the run game, and it's not so much with the running backs as it is with the offensive line, because this offensive line is really beat up. I mean, they've got Dan Feeney, who was the scheduled starter at the beginning of the year, lost for a knee injury. Then his replacement, David Kaminsky, who did a solid job for the first 5 ball games, he got knocked out. He did not play this week. He's out for the rest of the year. Jake Reed, who took his spot from the left side, moving over from the left side to the right side because of an injury to Bernard Taylor. Reed hurt an ankle in this ball game against Michigan State. I don't know if he'll play this week. And Ralston Evans, who's been playing at the right tackle position, he looks like he may be out with a knee injury. Peyton Eckert was a scheduled starter there at the beginning of the year, played the first game, and he's been lost ever since. So this is one beat-up offensive line, and I just don't know what Greg Fry, the offensive line coach, is going to do in this regard, because he's basically using a patchwork offensive line, and they have not been able to run the football, and that makes you one-dimensional, and when you're one-dimensional, teams can prepare for that.
Our guest here on our visitor segment today is Indiana play-by-play voice Don Fischer, as we talk about this weekend's game in the Big House, Michigan and Indiana. You know, Don, you've seen your fair share of coaches come and go over the years at Indiana, and Coach Wilson, now in his 3rd season, do you get a sense that he might be that guy, that coach, that can get the program to a point where they are competitive in the Big Ten year in and year out?
Well, I think that he has definitely given signs of that. The one thing that you've got to be able to do, if in fact you're going to be competitive year in and year out, is recruit. And without question, one of the big issues for Indiana over the years has been recruiting. And they always seem to get skill players, and most of them end up on the offensive side of the football. But you've got to be able to get skill players on the defensive side, too, and guys that can make a difference and are difference makers and playmakers on that side of the football. We saw that this past year. He had the best recruiting class that Indiana's had since they started doing rankings. And this group was, I think, ranked 32nd or 33rd in the country, someplace in that neighborhood. And I think the 4th best in the Big Ten. If he can continue to put year after year of those kinds of recruits together, there's no question in my mind that Indiana can become one of those teams that year in, year out is very competitive with the rest of the league. If he can't do it, then obviously they're going to struggle. But he's obviously given signs with 1 and 4 win seasons and still being able to put a recruiting class like that together that he has the ability to do it. And I don't think there's any question he's a really outstanding offensive mind coach. He knows what that area needs and why it can be successful or how it can be successful. He's coached it that way, and they're successful right now. It's now a matter of getting those defensive guys on board and enough players on the defensive side of the football that can make a big difference. And that's what we're going to find out.
Well, this Saturday, Don, the Hoosiers roll into the Big House, and Michigan coming off a very disappointing performance in the 4 overtime loss to Penn State. This right now looks to be a game where we're going to see some points put on the board, doesn't it?
Well, it would appear that way. I mean, obviously Michigan had some problems stopping Penn State, which we didn't think was a dramatically good offensive ball club. And that doesn't mean that Penn State's a bad team. Penn State, they're a great program. Bill O'Brien's done a terrific job of keeping things as stable as possible under the circumstances that program's gone through the last couple of years. And without question, they proved last weekend against Michigan that they're capable of beating anybody in this league on a given day. That said, Michigan, without question, is a team that hasn't played, I don't think, their best football yet this year. And I think most people would agree with that, including the coaching staff. And yet, at the same time, we know that they're capable. It's such a great program. They don't fall far off the depth chart when you're talking about really outstanding football players, and they've got some of those. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Indiana goes in there, if they can go in confident and play with that level of confidence throughout the ball game. The real key, of course, is Michigan and how well Michigan plays in this contest. And if they haven't got their best game, if they're not playing their best football, then Indiana will give them all they want, because this is a team that can put points on the board.
Well, last question, Don. As we mentioned earlier, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for Indiana schedule-wise the remainder of the year. This is really a brutal portion of the schedule. When it's all over this year, what will it take for a Hoosier fan or fans to say, it's been a good year, we can see the program is finally headed in the right direction?
Well, I think more than anything, people believe that this team's capable of getting bowl eligibility. That means 6 wins. They still have 3 games at home that everybody believes that they can beat in Minnesota, Illinois, and Purdue. If they would win those 3 ball games, they would become bowl eligible for the first time since 2007. And obviously, going to a bowl would be huge. And from a 4-win season a year ago, yeah, it's just 2 more wins than they had last year, but it's 6 in total. And they haven't been close to 6 wins here in recent years. So there's no question it would feel like it was a turnaround year.
Well, we're all waiting for Saturday. It should be quite the offensive show. Most of the fans I know are waiting to see this IU offense come into the Big House, so it should be a great game.
We're looking forward to it.
Our guest on today's show has been the longtime radio voice of Indiana football, Don Fischer. Don, thanks for taking the time from your busy schedule, and we look forward to having you back on next year.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Joining us next on our Michigan Game Day segment, Wolverine beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW, Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Back with us on Michigan Game Day to look back at that 4 overtime loss to Penn State Saturday night, and then look ahead to this Saturday against Indiana. Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Good to have you back, Nick.
Always good to be with you, Mike.
Well, Nick, Saturday night, if you're not a Michigan fan, if you're just a college football fan, everyone really loves to see a 4 overtime game. I guess it was exciting if you weren't a Michigan fan, but from the kickoff until the last play of that game, if you are a Michigan fan, that was a brutal game to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, I got to think that was probably a torture test if you were a Michigan fan watching that. Like you said, Mike, from the beginning to the very last play, just a brutal game. I think all the way around. You know, for Michigan. I mean, outside of a couple stretches in the second half where this team, they've proven before that they never really quit. And that was true again, there on Saturday with, they come back and take a lead against a team that they were frankly better than. But, just mistakes and, the same kind of stuff that's happened so many different times already this year, stuff that we've talked about. as stuff that's eventually going to catch up with them and kind of burn them, and that's exactly what happened. And I never really felt, sitting up there, I never really felt, even when they had a lead, I never really felt like that was their game to totally win. And when Penn State got it back to 7, I still kind of wondered. And then, of course, when they tied the game, it just didn't feel like there was any way Michigan was going to win. I think you mess with the football gods enough, and they're going to burn you. And I think that's what's happened here, this season. And they learned their lesson, or hopefully anyway, for their sake.
Well, Nick, through the first 5 games, most of what we could blame the poor play on was on the field, the mistakes, the turnovers, maybe a lot of young guys. But Saturday, some of the coaching decisions and the play calling on offense were a little bit dubious, weren't they?
Yeah, they were puzzling at best. I think that at the end of the game, obviously, I don't think Brady Hoke managed the final maybe 6.5 minutes of that game. You have the ball, you have it first down, I think it's 1st and 10 on the 30 or something like that with, Penn State's out of timeouts, there's 3 minutes to go. You just got a first down by basically spreading the football out and letting Gardner run it, and you somehow get yourself into a position of 3rd and 18 after a delay a game and just a couple more terrible decisions to run the ball up the middle. Then you pass on kicking a field goal and you punt it, which I'm not totally, against. And then from there, but, whatever, you did what you did. From there you put a freshman defensive back on the field in Channing Stribling, who's somehow matched up against Allen Robinson, who's the best receiver in the Big Ten. There's 2 long passes. One gets down to the goal line, they score. And then after that, they get 80 yards in 23 seconds, whatever it was. And after that, in overtime, you had 2 chances to win the game. They refused to do anything but just run it up the middle. And, just the play calling in general, and a lot of that, we want to point to Al Borges on, because he's the one calling the plays. But ultimately, I think that's Brady Hoke. I think that it's his decision, it's his football team, and it's his decision, one way or the other, to be that conservative or to go with what's working. And what was working was playing in the spread and letting Gardner run the football. And what wasn't working was trying to run it into the teeth of an offensive line who frankly isn't good enough right now, and they just continued to do it. 30 carries for 28 yards. I've never seen anything like that for running backs, and that was pretty bad. And, that game's on a lot of people, and the coaches are definitely not excused from it.
Well, let's talk about Devin for just a couple of minutes, Nick. 6 games, other than a very vanilla game plan against Minnesota that gave him less to do, we're still seeing the same things. They're just incredible and athletic plays, and then these mind-numbing turnovers and interceptions. Is there anything the staff can do at this point of the season, at the midway point, to change that, or is this what we're going to see the rest of the year, for better or for worse?
I think some of it is, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that some of it is stuff you might just have to deal with, because I have no idea. I cannot imagine that these issues have not been beaten over and over and over again in practice. And I know that, a couple weeks ago after it happened again at Connecticut, Borges sounded very frustrated, as frustrated as he probably ever has. And it's not, he wasn't pounding his fist or throwing a fit, but it sounded like, he had gotten to a point where he didn't know what else to say to Gardner as far as, teaching the little things here and there. But there is something that you can do, I think, and that's you can, whether anyone likes it or not, you can stop trying to be a pro-style team that sits him in the pocket and tries to have him make decisions, and just go back to being, a spread team where he's in the shotgun, he can be creative, he can do things with his legs, get open, and let some things go from there. I just don't think, I think this team, I understood the decision this year to try and move finally toward that, downhill pro-style, type game. They thought they had the players and personnel to do it, and they gave it a shot. And it's been 6 games, and I think that it's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they just don't have the team to do that right now. And maybe they will in 2 years, but right now it's still basically, for the most part, a spread offense, and that needs to be what it is. Through 6 games, they've run, they've been a pro-style power team with spread wrinkles. A couple compliments here and there. That needs to probably be flipped. They probably need to be a spread team, I think, with some wrinkles of pro-style stuff, because they can do it now and again, but I just think Gardner needs to be put in better positions to be what he naturally is, and what he naturally is somewhere in between a pro-style quarterback and Denard Robinson, and they need to find that mix somewhere, otherwise, it could be a long road.
Well, I think a lot of fans agree with you on that, Nick. I mean, we've seen 6 games of trying to pound it, which we were all ready for. I think all of us wanted to see that pro-style attack succeed because we thought this offensive line was going to be much better than it is, and for whatever reason, it's just not happening. And you're right. At the midway point of the season, you sort of have to cut bait and go with what works. Strangely enough, if you go to that primarily flip the playbook, as you said, and go to an option read offense and spread people out, that might really help that young offensive interior a lot too.
Yeah, I think you're in a unique position because what you've done by doing this is, Al Burgess has put in so many different things with this offense. They do so many different things. They don't do any one particularly well outside of the spread concepts. But what you've done is you've allowed yourself to, like you said, Mike, to cut bait on certain things and focus on the things that you do well. And if you're out there doing something well for a change, it's going to help confidence, because you can't tell me that these offensive linemen who have to go out there and get pounded every game and get pushed back, and then they have to answer questions from us every night about how they haven't done this or they haven't done that. The confidence has to just be completely gone. I mean, I think that was something I asked Brady Hoke after the game. Is this just a physical thing, or is it purely a confidence thing with those guys? And he didn't really know the answer, but it seems like it's probably a little bit of both, and maybe more toward the latter. That just like any quarterback who's gone through struggles. I mean, these guys have been beaten up. They haven't been able to get the job done, and it's hard to look at anything else outside of Devin Gardner's turnovers and blame any struggles on any part of this team except for the offensive line, because that's been the basis for everything that's gone wrong. The defense hasn't really been that bad. They've been pretty good, I think, in a lot of stretches. Gardner has made his mistakes, but he's still a playmaker. I can't think of any other really consistent problem outside the offensive line, and the way to address it is to kind of shift philosophies and just give him a chance, and that's probably the best thing you can do right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they have to move in that direction, and we'll, of course, see that on Saturday. Speaking of the defense, other than that last just horrendous drive in regulation, the D they were okay. They were just okay against Penn State, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually give them a little better than that. I think, given the fact that, again, 2 interceptions in the first half put them, give Penn State the football on the Michigan 20 or inside the 20, and those lead to touchdowns. I just have a hard time putting that on the defense. I think that so many times over the last 3 years, that group has been put in so many bad spots that it's come out of it, smelling okay more often than not, and I think we forget that. But, for the most part, they were solid. I think that, the turnovers, they created 4 turnovers. They scored a touchdown. Defensive backs picked off 2 passes. Frank Clark had 2 sacks and, got a fumble in overtime for crying out loud. I mean, I think the defense did everything it needed to do to win a football game and just continue to be sabotaged by their side of the field. I think if you're Michigan, you're encouraged by Jake Ryan coming back. I think that helped the pass rush. I think the defensive line was a little bit better as the game went on. Frank Clark, that was probably the best he's played. Chris Wormley played very well. Jabril Black played very well. Quentin Washington, who quietly has put together, I think, a terrific season. They couldn't block him to save their life. So I think that the defense is doing what Greg Madison's defense has always do. It's getting better, and it's improving, week to week, and that's what you expect from every spot on the field. And I think the defense is definitely, that's where they're trending, and they're not a dominant group, but they're more than good enough right now, and they were good enough to win Saturday, that's for sure.
With us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week, Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Nick, let's shift our focus to this Saturday with IU coming in. They're 3-3. They were pretty well hammered by Michigan State on Saturday in East Lansing, but they've got that prolific scoring offense. They're averaging over 500 yards per game, but their defense is the absolute worst in the conference. So this week, regardless of what strategy we employ, pro-style power game or spreading it out, if our offensive line can't push this defense around, the problems are even deeper than we thought, aren't they?
Yeah, if you can't move the ball against these guys, on the ground, like you said, Mike, whether it's, with a fullback or with, in the option read, then I don't know if you ever be able to do it, because they're, and we said that against Connecticut, and, for the first half, they didn't do anything, but you remember in the Connecticut game, once it's finally settled down, they ran the ball at will. So if you can't do it against Indiana, and you struggled to do it against Minnesota, and you absolutely couldn't do it against Penn State, then I don't know where you go from there, because something drastic probably has to happen at some point. But, Indiana is terrible against the run. They're terrible as far as big plays. They're terrible as, getting off the field defensively. They're the worst defense in the league. It's not even close, which is weird because, their offense is, and their offense probably doesn't help them because they're so quick, that they run that, hurry up spread that Kevin Wilson likes to run where they take like 2-3 seconds in between plays. They go as fast as they can, and that really can cause problems for offenses. But if they're not working out, that really burns their defense because they're on the field for a long time. But, Indiana's not, your father's Indiana a little bit. They're a better football team than they've been. They beat Penn State. They're more than good enough to come in and give Michigan more to sweat about than they want. And, you're going to have to be sharp. And guys are just going to have to get better. They're going to have to forget about that Penn State game, and that's going to be tough. Just wash it away. It's easier said than done, but you cannot let that linger, because if you do, Indiana's probably good enough to come in and beat you. If you just come out there, kind of moping around and with a hangover, you can't afford to just walk in here and just kind of, halfway play. It has to be full focus and full improvement, and just like any other Big Ten game. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond.
And what's scary about this offense, Nick, is you look at the state game, the Michigan State game on Saturday. They only had the ball 22 minutes and racked up almost 400 yards. And the key for Michigan State were those long drives, moving the chains, pounding the ball. That is definitely going to be the key. When you're looking at an IU offense, Coach Wilson said this on BTN last week, it is designed from snap to release of the ball to take 2.7 seconds. So you really take the defensive line as far as pressure out of the equation. So a lot of the pressure this week is going to fall on the linebackers and the secondary as the guys who are going to have to make plays.
Yeah, it's a big week for your linebackers, and obviously for the secondary because they like to throw it. But I think for your linebackers who, if you're Michigan, the linebackers are the strength of that defense. Desmond Morgan and James Ross have been, I think, terrific for the better part of the year, especially the last 3-4 weeks. And, Brandon Blier's been very good. Jake Ryan's back. So those guys being in position to kind of, because Indiana's not, they're not a team, when people think spread or hurry-up offense, they think they're a team that just sits there and throws the ball 35 yards down the field every time. They really don't. They try to do this, a lot of the fast, sort of underneath stuff that, 7-8 yards, stuff that your linebackers are going to have to cover and make plays. And then obviously the secondary is going to have to be in position. You're probably going to play a lot of nickel, and you're probably going to, not be able to rotate as much as you want, because if they're on the field for consistent drives, they're not going to take time. They don't huddle. They don't even pretend to huddle. It's just so fast. Even after incompletion, they're right back up there and going again. So just a lot of fundamental stuff. I think what Michigan State, what worked for them was every time Indiana tried to get wide on them, Michigan State was fast enough to run them down and make plays. But also you remember that, they can slip in a run. I think they had a 65-yard touchdown run that kind of fooled them out of that spread. So, they can do a lot of things to hurt you, but the one caveat is that their defense is so bad that you should be able to do whatever you need to answer every single score they have and then some. So, that's what Michigan State did. They pounded the ball. They kept that offense off the field, and that's probably the best defense, even if you have an elite group. So, that'll be the key. Whatever offense you run, it better work, against this group, because if it doesn't, you've got real problems.
Well, on Saturday, we saw Taylor Lewan go down with an undisclosed injury. Nick, I don't know if you've heard anything more on it. We will hear more this week. But if Taylor can't go, of course, the offensive line situation gets even dicier. Do you expect more tinkering up front this week?
Well, I think from what it sounded like, Taylor Lewan, it sounds like he should be fine. I don't know. Like I said, Mike will know more this week. If he can't play for whatever reason, Michael Schofield's probably your left tackle, and Eric Magnuson looks like he's your right tackle. That's what they did, on Saturday. And I don't think that was quite the disaster people might have thought it was. It was okay. Magnuson wasn't good, but he wasn't bad. But really the issue, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more changes along the inside, because the guards are just kind of a mess. Kyle Kalis was pulled out of that game at one point for a personal foul that was, really kind of silly. He was out of place and missed more blocks than he probably cares to remember in that one as well. And then Chris Bryant, who came in 2 weeks ago and shuffled up the offensive line, he was pulled for good in the second half because he was, on tape anyway, just not a very good effort by him. Effort, I'm sure, was fine, but just not a very good game. He was beaten more times than he probably made a block. So he was pulled in favor of Joey Brzezinski, the former walk-on who came in, and I don't think Joey Brzezinski is really the answer to anyone's problems either. I don't think he was great either. He wasn't terrible, but I think at some point you were just hoping that terrible wasn't the only thing you could have. So I don't know what they're going to do inside. I really don't, but I think that they'll entertain changes again because it just wasn't good enough. And the problem that they have, and the fact that they, when the staff took over, they had zero offensive line depth, and all they've been trying to do for 2 years is build the depth up. The problem they have is all those guys are still very young, and there's just not a lot of options. There's not, there isn't a Steve Hutchinson walking through the door here to help save these guys. It's just, you kind of have what you have. I think you probably already played your best five, Saturday when Chris Bryant started. I think physically he's probably the fifth best offensive lineman you have, and if he's going to give that kind of effort like that, I don't know what you do, because Ben Braden's had opportunities to play inside. He can't. The staff has said that he's not a guard. It's just not something. The guard positions are the real issues. The one thing that should be interesting, they dressed Kyle Bosch, the true freshman, and traveled him. He didn't play, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him maybe burned on him, and maybe he gets a chance. But something's got to happen inside, because right now that's the biggest problem on the team, and you can't go anywhere one way or the other if the offensive line continues to be a sieve up the middle.
Well, this week you would expect the Wolverines, especially with the talent edge, at least on paper, should be able to roll a team like Indiana, especially when you look at how bad this defense is. If they can't, and then you look at the rest of the schedule, what's ahead, it's beginning to look more and more formidable, isn't it?
Yeah, if you can't beat Indiana, it's going to be dire. If you can't beat Indiana, you're going to struggle to get to 7 wins. I think, to be quite honest, because it gets rough. At Michigan State, at Northwestern, home against Nebraska, at Iowa, home against Ohio State. That's pretty nasty. That's the worst part of the schedule. We knew it would be that way. I think everybody kind of thought if they can get to their second bye at 7-0, then they're, because every game they had would be winnable, they were in a perfect spot to make a run in November and do something. That's not going to happen. Obviously, they can still be 6-1, and you're not that far off from there. But if you can't beat Indiana, and I don't know how you're going to gather around in 2 weeks and then go into East Lansing and win. I don't know how you're going to go into Northwestern and win, and I don't know how you're going to do anything against Ohio State or Nebraska. So nothing's easy from here on out, and nothing's easy on Saturday either. Really, Indiana's not as bad as people probably think they are. So the breathers and the easy games are done. Even though those games weren't breathers and they weren't easy for Michigan, they didn't allow that to happen. So it's a tough road from here on out, and every mistake gets magnified. Every team knows exactly what Michigan's problems are, and until they do anything, they're going to face all these 9, 10-man fronts that just are going to stack up and just torture them. So until they change offensively, that's just how it's going to be. There's no room inside, and that's by design, because no one thinks Michigan can do anything on the ground. And until that changes, it's going to be rough. So that starts again this week, and then we'll see how they come out, and we'll see what they respond with.
Well, one last thing here, Nick, and consider the source, but on the TV side for ESPN Saturday night, Matt Millen said that for whatever reason, this Michigan team seems to lack a nasty edge on both sides of the ball. And he said he wasn't saying they weren't tough because he thought they were tough. He said they just seem to be missing in the nasty department on both sides of the ball. Do you think he has a valid point there?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think 100%. And maybe that's fair, Mike, that you say that's not what he says, and that the nastiness and kind of that edge. Maybe that's not necessarily a shot at their toughness, but for whatever reason, there isn't an edge to this group in any way. They have a lot of nice kids who I had a football coach a long time ago that said nice kids didn't make good football players, and they have a lot of really nice kids who do the right thing. And they play hard, they don't quit, and all that sort of deal, but they don't have a lot of guys that are going to knock you on the ground and kick dirt in your face, and just make something happen. So there's just, there's a lack of nastiness, there's a lack of edge, and I think that shows up on the field when you can't run the football, and the defensive line has had some of the problems it's had. Michigan fans have seen enough really good football over the years to know that, some of the best offensive lines they've had, if you think about some of the guys that were on those lines, and you think about some of the guys that played defense that were terrific. Those guys were, Steve Everett. I mean, Steve Everett had an edge, right? I mean, these guys, they had something about them. Even look back to 2011. David Molk was a player who played with a great edge. He played right on the edge of, being crazy and being right under control, and he kept the offensive line together, by doing that. And he was a leader, and they kind of reflected him. Mike Martin on the other side of the ball. He played with an edge, and he played kind of nasty, and he was the guy that everybody looked to, and they did the same thing. You don't have a guy like that. Not in your captain. Taylor Lewan's not like that. Whether he thinks he is or not, he's really not. Jake Ryan's not like that. You just don't have that right now, and I don't know if you can blame anybody for it. I think it just kind of is what it is. So if there is somebody on the roster that plays that way, they're not being used, they're not being given the chance, to show their personality. So it's just absent, and it's something that I think some of these young guys, when you grow into that as time goes on, they're still very young, so maybe that's part of it too. But he's absolutely right. There's a lack of an edge in general here, that if you want to play football the way they want to do it, which is you want to run the ball and you want to be a nasty defense, somebody's got to be nasty out there, and it's just not happening right now.
Our guest on our Michigan Game Day segment this week has been Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. As always, Nick, it's been a pleasure, and we'll get you back on here in another couple of weeks.
All right, Mike, sounds good. Thank you.
Wolverine Quick Hits is coming up next as we wrap it up for another week here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits this week, at his Monday presser, Coach Hokes said Taylor Lewan is recovering from his hip thing. Nothing more was said about the injury, other than he is expected back this weekend. Other than that, the team is pretty healthy for Indiana. Coach Hoke also defended his offensive line coach, Coach Funk, and offensive coordinator Al Borges. Both came under some criticism from the media after Saturday's game. Coach Funk for the line showing no improvement, and Coach Borges for what many thought was conservative play calling throughout the game, but especially in overtime. Hoke also said he wasn't worried about kicker Brendan Gibbons after his rough day against Penn State. Kickoff for this Saturday's game is at 3:30 p.m. and will be broadcast on the Big Ten Network. We're in the meat of the Big Ten schedule now, and you'll need your daily fix of Michigan football. There is no better place to get it than right here at GBM Wolverine. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and become a member today. We have player profiles, recruiting news, our lively message board, plenty of chatter about this season, and the always popular Monday Night Live chat with all of our talented writers here at GBM Wolverine. So don't delay. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and join today. Make sure you're in the Wolverine loop this season. Don't forget our show app is now available from a variety of sources. For Android users, we're in the Market Store at Amazon.com. For Apple devices, our app is available in the iTunes Store. Another great way to tune us in for free is with the TuneIn Radio app. You can also hear the show on Stitcher Radio on demand. Download the free app today at www.stitcher.com. And as always, if you do get the show from iTunes, please take a minute or two to write a review about the show or say something. It really does help a lot. Our phone lines are open for your calls 24/7, and we would love to hear from you. Give us your thoughts on the Indiana game, on the season to date, really anything maize and blue. Call 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. You can also email your thoughts and opinions to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. Give us a shout anytime. Next week is the final bye week of the season. We'll be here, though, to recap the Indiana game and take a look at where this team is as they prepare for a brutal 5-game stretch in November. I hope to have Michigan great Greg Skrepenik on with us next week to get his take on the offensive line in particular and in general, what Michigan needs to do if they want to be a serious contender in this year's Big Ten race. So I hope you'll join us for that. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think victory, and let's hope we see a nasty, angry Michigan team show up this weekend against the Hoosiers. Until next week, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.